will begin celebrating the 73rd Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Independence Day. However, this day of joy and thanks is incomplete without the recognition of the sacrifices made to ensure that the State of Israel came into being and continues to exist safely and securely.
Today we commemorate Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Day of Remembrance, for the over 25,000 Israeli soldiers who gave their lives in the defense of the State of Israel. On this day, we also remember all those who died in terrorist attacks perpetrated against the Jewish people and Medinat Israel. Please do not applaud during this assembly. Please be upstanding for the singing of the Australian National Anthem and at the conclusion.
And even to sacrifice my life in the defense of the homeland and the freedom of Israel. This is what an IDF soldier commits to when sworn into the army. Unfortunately, throughout Israel's history, soldiers have often had to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect their comrades, their people, and their state.
They did so in 1948 in the War of Independence, in 1956 in the Sinai Campaign, in 1967 in the Six-Day War,
during the War of Attrition from 1967 till 1970, in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, in 1982 in the First Lebanon War, and in 15 years of conflict in the South Lebanon Security Zone.
In the early 2000s during the Second Intifada, in 2006 the Second Lebanon War, and since 2008 in 3 separate conflicts with Hamas in Gaza.
It is these soldiers and their stories that we remember today.
Yom HaZikaron is also a day in which we remember the thousands of innocent Israelis, Jews, and non-Jews whose lives were brutally cut short in murderous terrorist attacks from the beginning of the state until the present day.
On this day of Yom HaZikaron, perhaps more than any other day of the year, we embrace the idea of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh. All of Israel are responsible for one another. Even though we are so far away, we open our hearts and our minds and stand in solidarity with all the people of Israel.
On this day, we salute and stand in awe of the sacrifice and commitment of the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces and remember those whose lives were cut short in murderous terrorist attacks. On this day, we become one with the families who have lost loved ones, fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, children, cousins, and friends, for whom every day is Yom HaZikaron.
Hayom B'Yachad, today together. We will spend time learning about the fallen soldiers and civilians. V'nizkor et kulam, we will remember them all.
Erez was born in Rishon LeZion and grew up in Bat Yam near the sea, and as the eldest of 3 brothers, was the apple of his parents' eye. His love was windsurfing and the ocean, and any spare moment he had, he would make his way down to the ocean to pursue his passion, often cutting class at school in order to do so.
Erez's second passion was the army, and he was determined to become a soldier in a combat unit. Known throughout his life for his long flowing hair, his friends and family held a party just before his enlistment where they cut his hair as he prepared to become a combat soldier in the Israeli Defense Force.
Erez joined the Duchifa Combat Battalion, where he would go on to become a squad commander. He was admired and respected for his fairness, toughness, concern for his soldiers, and determination. Erez's soldiers recalled him never complaining and always encouraging them. They told stories of him going through his soldiers' tents at night, covering the ones whose blankets had fallen off in their sleep, and even staying up late one night to to mend a hole in a tent so his soldiers wouldn't get wet in the rain.
Eventually, he was selected for a course to become a combat officer, an honour and responsibility that he took very seriously. Just before starting the course, he was stationed with his men on a combat line north of Ramallah, a posting Erez was eager to accept as he wanted practical operational experience before becoming an officer.
On October 19, 2003, Erez and 2 other soldiers were killed while on a combat patrol when terrorists fired on them from behind. Erez was killed a month before his 20th birthday. He is survived by his parents, Ami and Malka, and 2 younger brothers. We light this candle in memory of Erez and all the fallen soldiers of the IDF.
On Monday evening, the 10th of November 2014, Dalia Lemkes was standing at a bus stop near the entrance to the town of Alonshvut, waiting for a lift home at the end of a long day at work.
Dalia's family had made Aliyah to Israel from South Africa 30 years beforehand and had lived in the town of Tekoa, just south of Jerusalem, for the past 15 years. The eldest of 6 siblings, Dalia worked as an occupational therapist in kindergartens in Kiryat Gat, as she loved working with children. She also spent her spare time volunteering at the Tekoa branch of Yad Sarah, which loans medical equipment to the needy and elderly. Dalia loved to bake cakes with her mother. She liked to help brides look beautiful by doing their makeup for them before their weddings. A kind, giving, gentle young woman looking forward to marriage and creating her own family, Dalia was just getting started in life after finishing her university studies.
As she crossed the street towards the bus stop that evening at about 4:30 p.m., a Palestinian terrorist drove towards her and hit her with his car. While Dalia lay injured on the footpath, he jumped from his car and stabbed and killed Dalia Lemkes. She was only 26 years old.
Dalia is not only a name from a faraway country, nor is she merely a statistic, another victim of terror in a country that has known too much sadness and loss. She was also the first cousin of our family, who are themselves members of our Scopus family. I will now share with us his family's experiences and memories as they and we come to terms with this terrible tragedy.
Good morning, rabbis, teachers, and students. We often hear of tragic terrorist attacks in Israel. We are shocked, angry, and enraged. But the victims are usually just faces, and the only thing that connects us is our religion and love for our Jewish homeland. We are disturbed by the incident, but nothing in our lives really changes or alters. We express our disapproval and repulsion, and then life goes on. The murder of Dalia Lemkes was different. On the 10th of November 2014, a Palestinian terrorist drove his car into Dalia at a hitchhiking stop. He then got out of his vehicle and started stabbing her. She was injured from the car and was not able to defend herself against the knife attack. I often think of how different the outcome would have been had my cousin Dalia been delayed or ahead by just a few seconds. Maybe she would have had time to run behind the concrete barrier, but unfortunately she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. If there was one person who made the most of her time, the short life she had, it was Dalia. She spent all her time caring for people, whether it was helping her parents and siblings, providing occupational therapy to kids at Kiryat Gat, or doing her friends' makeup for their weddings. She loved to paint, especially flying birds and water scenes. She was always busy, always had so much to do. She was shy and quiet, but with a strong will and sense of purpose. In 2006, Dahlia was wounded in another stabbing attack while standing at a bus stop. But despite this horrific incident, she was determined that this would not change her. Being afraid or changing the way of her life would mean that the terrorist who stabbed her had achieved his goal by frightening her and her fellow Israelis. Over the years since the first attack, she became braver, more defiant. Her belief in Hashem and in the state of Israel grew stronger. For this reason, I know that in the last moments of her life, she would have been so brave despite being in such a frightening situation. In the years since she died, we experienced some amazing outcomes while going through some very mixed emotional highs and lows. The day after the funeral, Blake Street Shul held a memorial service for Dahlia. We expected maybe 50 people to attend. When the shul filled up, we could not believe what we saw. There was not a spare seat. Dahlia may have been our cousin and niece from Israel, but the circumstance of her death had touched our whole community, and everyone needed to stand together and comfort each other. In Israel, my family is often recognized. People stop them in the street to tell them how sorry they are about Dahlia's death. Most of the time, it is my family who end up consoling these strangers. A few months after, my Aunt Brenda, Dahlia's mother, attended a grief seminar in Belgium for mothers who have lost children to terrorism. My two cousins, aged 13 and 16 at the time, also attended a Kobe Mandel camp for siblings who have lost a brother or sister through terrorism. The hall in Toccoa is named in honor of Dahlia. Every simcha in that hall has a link to Dahlia. It is very special that in some small way, Dahlia is at each and every simcha. This was not just another terrorist victim. This was my own flesh and blood. This was family. This was someone we loved, someone with whom we shared special moments with. This time, life will never be the same again. They say time heals. I hope with the continued support from my family in Israel, from our Melbourne community, we will get through this, and hopefully something positive can be learned and gained from this tragic event. Rest in peace, Dahlia. We will always love and miss you, and you will always remain in our hearts forever. I now light this candle in memory of my dear cousin Dahlia Limkis and all Jewish victims of terror. Yehi Zichram Baruch, may their memory be blessed.
Hadar Cohen was born on the 9th of March, 1997, the daughter of Sigalit and Ofer, the middle child in her family, a sister to Mor and Yorin. She was an energetic, adventurous, and happy child.
As a teenager, Hadar dreamed of completing her military service with Mishmar HaGvul, the Israeli border police. Inspired by a love of her country, she wanted to make sure she was at the front line of protecting the people she cared about and ensuring the security of the state.
On February 3rd, 2016, Hadar Cohen was positioned at the Old City's Damascus Gate in Jerusalem as a border policewoman, her dream fulfilled. She was 19 years old and had recently completed school in her hometown of Or Yehuda, a nice neighbourhood on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. Her service had begun merely 2 months earlier, and she was still undergoing training. Less than a week earlier, she had proudly been sworn into the border police at a special ceremony, cheered on by her parents. This was her first operational deployment. Hadar was so excited and couldn't wait to tell her father, Ofer. The night before, she called her dad. Abba, ani yotzet lahafala rishona b'sha'ar shechem. Te'echel li b'hatzlacha. Abba, wish me luck.
Hadar was part of a team of 3 patrolling the area. Half an hour before the end of her first shift, Hadar and her team members identified 2 men acting suspiciously and asked them for identification. One of the men then suddenly attacked Hadar's fellow squad member. Hadar heroically intervened and successfully saved her friend's life. At that point, a 3rd terrorist, previously unnoticed, opened fire, critically wounding Hadar. She was rushed to hospital, where she later passed away from her wounds. The terrorists had planned a much larger mass casualty event. By heroically stopping them, Hadar saved many lives that day.
On her grave are inscribed the words, "A hero of Israel." With her death, she saved many lives. Her courage, strength, and beauty, Hadar, light our path. Hadar is buried in the Yehud Military Cemetery. Many social and military initiatives have been launched in her honor and memory, and to date, 8 babies have been named Hadar after her.
Hadar Cohen was only 19 years old. Yehi Zichra Baruch. We light this candle in memory of Hadar and all the fallen soldiers of the IDF.
Amit Ben Yigal was born on the 8th of February 1999 in Ramat Gan. As a child, Amit loved nature and travelling the length and breadth of the country. He was a madrich in the Scouts and would bring his natural joy, humour and ruach to every event. He was also a talented basketball player and an athlete.
The Ben Yigal family's connection to the Australian Jewish community is profound. During the 1997 Maccabiah Games bridge collapse disaster, in which 4 Australian athletes died, Baruch Ben Yigal, Amit's father, selflessly dived into the Yarkon River and saved the life of an Australian athlete. Baruch continued to volunteer and help the Australian contingent in subsequent Maccabiah Games and became an honorary member of the squad. He would bring Amit with him, who proudly wore the Australian shirt and connected with the Aussie athletes.
As his father's only child, Amit had to get special permission from him to serve in a combat unit. His father later said, "I signed the permission form. You told me, 'Dad, don't deny this from me.' I signed it and you rejoined as if you just won the lottery." Amit enlisted in the army in November 2017 and served in the elite Golani Reconnaissance Battalion.
He was the entertainer and the life of the party. the deep thinker, and the soldier who thought of everyone else. He had a serious girlfriend, Osher, and had the world at his feet. On Yom HaZikaron 2019, Amit wrote the following post on Facebook.
To be a Golanchik, to be in Golani, is to see the view from the window of the bus and know that you've walked here before. It's to practice shooting at cardboard targets and to wait for the real thing. It's to never look back, but to always know that there is an entire country that is behind you. It is to not let who you are distract you from who you would become. I'm Amit Ben Yagal and I am a Golanchik. I am proud to be part of the long line of those who came before me, and I am proud to continue in their path. I always remember getting emotional on Yom HaZikaron, and there was never a ceremony where I didn't end up with tears in my eyes. But for the last 2 years, I've marked Yom HaZikaron in a different way from how I did when I was a civilian. This time, I'm a soldier with a uniform and a beret, and I represent something important. Suddenly, my words have more meanings, and my actions more consequences. I want to say to everyone reading this post, take a moment of silence, put a sad song that you like on, close your eyes and focus on one person from among the 23,741 fallen soldiers. Just one soldier. Close your eyes and see them opposite you, and let your feelings take you to wherever they lead.
He was asked to sign on for more army service and was considering his future when tragedy occurred.
Staff Sergeant Amit Ben Yagal was killed in the early hours of the morning of Tuesday, the 12th of May 2020, during an operation to detain terror suspects in the village of Yabad in the northern West Bank. He was struck by a rock hurled from a building after the mission had been completed. He was treated by military medics at the scene and evacuated by helicopter, but he succumbed to his wounds. He was the only IDF combat casualty in 2020.
Hundreds attended his funeral. At the funeral, his father said, "You were supposed to bury me, not the other way around. From the moment you were born, I loved you. At 6:30 this morning, I became a miserable person, someone who has nothing. I had 21 years of joy with you. I don't know how to begin life without you. I am broken. I have one child and I am proud of him. We have no other country, even with the heavy price I've paid. I am now alone." Amit is survived by his parents, his girlfriend, and 2 stepsisters from his mother's side. He was buried in the Bay Area Yaakov Military Cemetery. He was 21 years old.
We would now like to invite from Year 10 to light a candle. His grandfather is a close friend of Amit's father, Baruch Ben Yagal. As a representative of Maccabi Australia present at the Maccabea Bridge disaster, his grandfather developed a strong connection with the Ben Yagal family in the wake of the incident. Zach is lighting this candle in honour of Amit and all the fallen soldiers and victims of terror who we remember today. Yehi Zichram Baruch.
Israeli singer and composer Chava Alberstein wrote the deeply sad and moving song Rikma Noshit, meaning human tissue. This song speaks of the fragility of life, the pain of loss, and the interconnectedness of all our lives with each other. Some of the lyrics are, "When I shall die, something of mine will die in you. When you die, something of yours in me will die with you all around the country." We have featured this song at our school previously on Yom HaZikaron, including our online ceremony last year. If you are by now familiar with the words and the tune, please join in for Shira Bet Tzibor, singing together as we unite to mourn, connect, and remember.
The thousands who have lost their lives for the state of Israel are not merely numbers. They were individuals with hopes and dreams and thoughts and feelings, like you and I have. These individuals had mothers, fathers, siblings and friends. They laughed and they cried, and they each brought something unique to the world.
The prophet Jeremiah teaches, Ki midei dabri bo, zachor azkirenu od. For whenever I speak of him, I remember him still. When we talk about them, when we incorporate the traits of the fallen into our own lives, we remember them. When we make space for them in our hearts and minds, we bring something of them back to life.
Bemotan tzivu lanu et hachayim. With their deaths, they commanded us life and challenge us to live the best lives we possibly can. We have the responsibility to remember the fallen and to strive to lead lives worthy of their sacrifice.
If we do this, then we truly honor them. Yehi zichram baruch.
In Israel, on Yom HaZikaron, as a siren is heard throughout the country, everyone stops what they are doing to observe a minute of silence to pay tribute to the fallen.
As the siren sounds, like the scenes of patchwork quilts that have suddenly come together, a people stands united, heads bowed, remembering.
We remember the sons and daughters who lost their lives so that we could live. The brothers and sisters who gave up their futures to secure our future in our land. We think of those we knew and those we didn't. We remember what we've seen or heard or experienced firsthand. We remember them all.
Please be upstanding for the minute of silence and remain standing for El Maleh Rachamim, Kaddish, and the prayers for the soldiers of Yad.
El Maleh Rachamim, שוכן במרומים, המצאי מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים הטהורים וגיבורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמות חיילי צבא הגנה לישראל, ולוחמי המחתרות שנפלו במלחמות ישראל, וכל הלוחמים במערכות העם, שחרפו נפשם למות על קדושת השם, וכל אלה שנרצחו בארץ ומחוצה לה, בידי המרצחים מארגוני הטרור. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וייצור בצור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימים, ונאמר אמן.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ולמד יברך חיותי והמליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם על יולמי עומיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשו בריחו, לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמרן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיים, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
מי שברך אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי וחיילות צבא ההגנה לישראל ואנשי כוחות הביטחון, העומדים על המשמר של ארצנו וערי אלוהינו, מגבול הלבנון ועד מדבר מצרים, ומן הים הגדול עד לבוא הערבה, ובכל מקום שהם, ביבשה, באוויר ובים. ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו וחיילותינו מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם. ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ובעטרת ניצחון, ויקוים בהם הכתוב, כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם, להילחם לכם עם אויביכם, להושיע אתכם, ונאמר אמן.
מי שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, יוסף, משה ואהרון, דוד ושלמה. הוא יברך וישמור וינצור את נעדרי צבא ההגנה לישראל ושבוייו. יפדה משביים ויחזירם לשלום בקרוב, בעבור שכל הקהל הקדוש הזה מתפלל בעבורם. בשכר הזה הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא עליהם רחמים, ירבה כוחם ויבטל צערם, וישלח להם רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף, ויחזירם לחיק משפחותם, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן.
Please remain standing for Hatikva.